A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Nearly everyone has been hurt by the actions of other people. And when we're hurt, it's easy to hold on to feelings of anger and bitterness as a form of self-protection. But we may even want to punish or hurt the person or people that have hurt us. But the actions and words of Jesus continue to ring true throughout history, that forgiveness is God's way and therefore our way. Our special guest today is passionate about helping people journey through life in a way that is biblical and helpful to people spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and even physically. Wendy Byrne's latest book is called Unmask: Stop Hiding and Start Living. It's about transformation through trauma and pain into forgiveness and restoration. Wendy is also an internationally certified Maxwell leadership coach, speaker, and trainer. And it's our great pleasure and privilege to welcome Wendy to the show today. Wendy Byrne, welcome.
Andrew, thank you. It is always so good to be back with Vision, and I'm so excited about our topic today.
Yeah, well, I am too, Wendy, and I was a pastor, well, I kind of still am a pastor, but I had a church for 18 years I led, and I used to dread preaching about forgiveness when I felt it was time, because I knew that when I preached about it, I'd get tested in that area again, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, to forgive someone, is it?
No, absolutely. And I've been doing a little bit of work on forgiveness in churches recently. And just like that, I was tested in a situation and I thought, oh God, you're making sure that I am aware that I understand that forgiveness is the little things as well as the really big traumatic things. So yes, but don't you love how the Holy Spirit does that, Andrew, that He's wanting us to be sure that we really understand what forgiveness is all about.
Absolutely, and I think you and I probably both prayed some prayer way back when, saying, God, never let us preach something that we don't live, let us always be real. So I'm sure there's a few prayers back there, and that's why, I don't know about you, whenever I preach about any topic, I find I end up living it the following week, whether it's evangelism, forgiveness, giving, whatever it is.
Yeah, same.
So here we are, Wendy. So, remind us of your story, because you have experienced significant trauma and abuse in your earlier years, and that really is what lays the foundation for our topic today.
Yeah, it actually lays the foundation of the authority God has given me to be able to take something the enemy meant for evil and turn it for His good and for His purpose. As a child of 13, my father committed suicide in front of me. Actually, he got me to participate in his suicide and hand him the gun that he used to kill himself in front of me. So that was a start of a very traumatic day for me. But prior to that, my family were alcoholics, domestic violence, physical abuse within our home, within the community, I guess, we lived in, and family. So this day was just a bit more of a catalyst of that. And, as a 13-year-old child, witnessing that in that moment was the most horrific thing that I guess anybody can see. And many have worse stories than mine, and I don't for a minute think mine is the worst story out there, but it's one that impacted my life and that I speak from to show that you can overcome. That was the start of a day. That night, we stayed with an auntie and uncle, and my uncle's just decided that his form of comfort for me, because I was extremely distressed, was to rape me, and so simply because he could. So the compound of that day was out of control, as you can imagine. A 13-year-old girl that didn't know anything about any of this. I was a little country girl that just took my heart out of me and changed my life, and really set me on a path of, number one, taking responsibility. And I think that's important as we talk about forgiveness, taking responsibility for my dad, because I handed him the gun. So it was my fault that I killed him. My uncle, I took responsibility for something that I didn't even understand as that little child. And then I took responsibility to care for my mum, because I'd taken her husband away and she was an alcoholic. So it was, and my brothers and sisters. So I picked up responsibility I picked up the trauma, the wounds, the anguish from that day.
But let's stop there, Wendy. When you say you took responsibility, you mean you started to carry a deep sense of guilt and blamed yourself for your dad's death and for even your uncle's actions,
Yes.
and then...
Absolutely.
Wow. And so for a little 13-year-old girl, I can't imagine how hard that must have been.
Yeah. And the enemy gets into that space, doesn't he? And it's just the battle in your heart because you blame yourself. And that was so significant because it was the guilt, because and I was on the same path as my parents until I was 34, drinking heavily, contemplating suicide, and I've lost 2 sisters that just couldn't make it through for the same reason. Not that they were present, but they had their own trauma. And when I gave my heart to the Lord, when I made that decision, the lady that prayed for me in Newcastle, we were at the time, said, God knows the guilt you're carrying over your father's death. So that was so significant because I had never shared that with anybody.
Wow, so that lady just sensed that in her heart and she just prayed that prayer by faith.
Yeah, and for me, I believe the Holy Spirit was using that moment and that lady to say, hey, God knows your story. Still, it's a big journey to know God. That's one decision, and then it's that relationship building that comes out of that. And that's where I believe forgiveness comes in, because in that time between 13 to 34, I was angry. I was an angry woman. I was an angry person. I blamed the world for my lot, for everything. And that's when we hold on to unforgiveness. We become bitter. We become resentful. People on the outside looking at us because we wear that mask may never see that. But what's inside of us is there, and that's what eats us away. And in my new book, I quoted that. And I love this quote. I heard somebody say it, so I don't want to say I stole it. I borrowed it. That says, demons go into our souls and they lift weights. And so when we hold on to those things, they get in our soul and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and stronger. And that's why forgiveness, I'm so passionate about giving everybody help to be able to understand forgiveness.
Yeah, so good. But I want to go back to your childhood. So you're in a little country town. That was in Queensland, was it, or New South Wales?
That was in New South Wales. That was Uralla, which is outside of Armidale, near Kentucky, between Tamworth, Kentucky, Uralla, Armidale. So it was a little country town.
So I'm just wondering, at 13 in a little country town, were there any support services? Was there any counselling? Did anyone try and help you process what you went through?
Nobody. I had no support whatsoever. I didn't even share about the rape because I didn't understand what had happened, and it was my fault because my auntie told me it was my fault. Yeah. I had to give evidence at a coroner's inquest about my dad's death at 13 with no support and no counselling. And I said it was an accident because I was blaming me. So instead of saying this is what my dad got me to do and this is what I did, I said it was an accident because I didn't know any different.
Wow. Did you, when he asked for the gun, did you know what he was going to do, or you just thought he just wants the gun?
No, I always obeyed what my dad told me to do. I was a bit of a daddy's girl, but I also knew that he could lose his temper and could become violent. So if he asked me to do something, I was immediately going to do that. Because you love, you think about it, you love somebody, you want to do, even if you're frightened of them, you do what they asked you to do. And he was laying on my bed and he told me to get him his gun. I'm sure, and I can't remember, but I'm sure I would have thought, I wonder why he wants this. But I didn't think not to give it to him. It was just automatically, absolutely, I got it. And that's when he told me, this is how you kill yourself. Put the barrel in his mouth and pull the trigger in front of me. So.
Oh man, I can't imagine that, Wendy. That's just awful. And man, you've had to watch that. Was your mum home at the time?
My mum was asleep in another room at the time, and my brothers and sisters were outside. So I'm not sure what she thought in that moment. But, they would have heard the noise. But what I did do, Andrew, is I grabbed my brother and sisters and I ran out of the house because I did not want them to see what I had seen. And to be honest, that image stayed with me for such a long time. And it's only by the grace of God that he has empowered me to be able to share this and not feel the grief or the stress or the strife or the guilt or the horror, and as I came to the Lord and over the years of forgiveness and processing, I felt like the Holy Spirit say to me, or the Lord say to me, that he actually carried me that day I ran down the road, that I was not alone, that he was carrying me through that. And we don't know why bad things happen, except that there's evil in the world. Bad things happen. It's what we do with it that matters, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just talk about your dad. So obviously at first you're in shock and then you're trying to process it, then you blame yourself. Did you reach a point that you sense God wanted you to forgive your dad for disappointing you and hurting you and even leaving you? Was that part of your journey to actually just forgive your dad for really checking out of your life?
Yes, absolutely. And I can remember being in church in Brisbane, and it was Father's Day. And it's the first time that it really hit me that I needed to do some work in this relationship with my dad, and to go through and forgive him for all of those things, for putting me in that position, for the way that I was treated because of what he did. So his actions, that he would think to include me in that, all of that forgiveness, for exposing and forgiving my mum for being passed out in bed drunk and allowing my uncle to rape me. Like, that was her way to overcome the pain on that day. So forgiveness for her, but it started on that Father's Day. And honestly, as I think about it now, I can remember where I was sitting in that church when the pastor preached on forgiveness. And I was down on my knees and sobbing and crying out to God and asking for him to help me to forgive them. And that's only the start of the journey, though, isn't it, Andrew, of forgiveness? It then becomes the process.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wanted to ask that about your dad, because I think for many people, both men and women, when there's disappointment and hurt and trauma caused by our father figure, it can really affect our relationship with God, our Father, can't it? It can cause a blockage and a barrier, which robs us of this incredible intimacy and this incredible relationship with God, our Father.
Absolutely, and you don't trust God. And, often when I speak, and I have the privilege of speaking in churches, is that I might have made a commitment to God that day when that lady prayed for me, but there was no way I was going to trust this unknown God, because my experience of fathers was pretty horrid. And so it then becomes a journey of why you would trust the character of this God. And that was a journey for me to take, as well as a journey of forgiveness, because we look as God as our Father, as our Abba Father, which is just so incredibly precious. But it's not from there to there. It has to be the journey of understanding who this Heavenly Father is and why we could actually trust him, because I had no trust for anybody. I didn't even trust people to tell them my story, because my trust was stolen on that day. So it's been such a journey, but honestly, the richest journey of my life. And I know I've said to Neil in the past, I wouldn't change anything, even though it was horrific, because it's made me who I am today. And it gives me that sense of knowing that my Father, my Heavenly Father, loves me so much that he took me on the journey to forgive my earthly father and the men in my life at that time that hurt me, to be able to be where I am, so that I can be that ambassador for him, whether it's in the secular world or the Christian world. And, so I know that seems strange, but I
doesn't seem strange at all, Wendy. I mean, it's such a cliche in our society that people have daddy issues, and it's often directed at women, but men can have daddy issues as well. But, I think, this whole, the father heart of God. I was talking to a trauma coach recently in America, and she said that, her key to being healed of trauma is literally that people discover the father heart of God. Just they realize that God's their father and that he loves them. And but let me ask, so you said you were basically saved at 34. So between 13 and 34, were you married or in any long-term relationships with men? And looking back, did you find that you really didn't trust men and you couldn't really build deep relationships with other men?
Yeah, I was married. My first marriage, I've been married twice. My husband now is my second marriage. My first marriage, no, I couldn't trust men at all. And it was a very difficult marriage and a difficult relationship. And that was not, I don't believe, about him. That was about me and my ability to trust him.
But were you aware of that during the marriage? Like, were you thinking consciously, I can't trust this guy? Or you just know, looking back, in retrospect, which is the easiest way for us to learn, is we look back, in the moment we're hopeless. But in the moment you were not aware that you were not really trusting him?
No, not at all. I had no idea of that, what was going wrong. And I got married so young. My mum had committed suicide by then. And I knew the day that I was marrying him that I shouldn't. I was crying all day thinking, I don't want to marry this man, but I didn't know how not to. And I was so young. I just turned, I was 17, turning 18, so I was really young. And so, it was just, the blessing out of that marriage is my son and a daughter that came out of that marriage, and now I have another son and daughter as well. So, but I was not in a mental state, physically or mentally sound or emotionally sound to be able to trust a man after what had happened to me.
Wow. Well, I want to open up the talk lines now, Wendy, to callers, because I think most of us out there, myself included, we have been disappointed by our fathers in different ways, and this is a part of our journey. I want to ask people, have you got a story? Have you gone on this journey like Wendy has, like I have, or maybe you are realizing now you need to go on that journey and you want to ask Wendy some questions, because this is such a key, isn't it, Wendy? It's such a key to faith. We sometimes in the West think of faith as some sort of thing like you go to the gym and you work out and you get this faith. But I think really understand that God is our Father and he loves us. I think that's really the key to faith. Talking today about forgiveness and the Father heart of God, and for some of us even learning to forgive our earthly fathers. You can call us on 1-800-316-316. I can see a couple of people are trying to call. Just be patient. We've only got one producer, so that producer's talking to one person at a time. So if the phone keeps ringing, it's not because it's not going to get picked up. It just means there is someone else on the line. But give us a call on 1-800-316-316, because we want to hear your story about forgiveness. We want to hear a little bit of your journey, or maybe you've got some questions to ask our very special guest today. Her name is Wendy Burns, and she's been on a journey in life which many of us have not had to go through such trauma, but she's come out of it having forgiven, having found freedom, having found restoration and wholeness. And we would love to take your calls as well on 1-800-316-316. But Wendy, you mentioned earlier that you prayed, or someone prayed for you, and they said they felt that you had to forgive your dad, or that God was going to restore you. What happened after that prayer was prayed?
That was the initial give my heart to Jesus prayer, and she'd said about that I was carrying the guilt. I still had to journey and find out who God was. So it took many, many years of understanding who this God was, and started by I was part of a church by then. I'd started to go to church with my kids so that they would have a better option than I had. Not for me, which was really interesting. I didn't go to church for me. I went for my kids. And so God started with me, right? And so it was a journey of understanding the character of God, and it took me a long time to realise that it wasn't just a God that was preached at me, but this God, this Father, my beautiful Abba Father, actually wanted a relationship with me. So understanding his character and reading the Word and sitting in under people that would mentor me and help me understand who God was. And that's where my true forgiveness came, and my true trust in God, because it has to be, you mentioned it earlier about trust, and I've so been learning about trust and rest. So as we trust God, in Song of Songs it talks about come with me through the archway of trust in the Passion Translation. And so that's really vivid for me because I love the creation of words. So I know when I'm on the wrong side of that archway, when I'm not trusting God. So I know that I need to be on the right side. So I trust and rest and lean in on God. And that has been my journey. And you know what? I'm still on it. We are all still on that journey of growing more and trusting more and resting more in Him.
Amen. I love that archway of trust. Well, we do have a couple of callers, Wendy, and others have tried to call. Please persevere with these talk lines. Just call us on 1-800-316-316. But we have a caller now called Stephen. Stephen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
What would you like to share with us today, Stephen?
I just wanted to ask Wendy, I've sort of had a fairly traumatic life, and I just wanted to ask Wendy if I'm having trouble getting in touch with God. I didn't years ago, but I found that as my sort of trauma gets more embedded in me, I find it sort of more difficult to not pray. I pray all the time. But I just wanted to question her about how I can go about praying to God.
Yeah, Wendy, have you got some thoughts for Stephen?
Oh, Stephen, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And sometimes we feel like we are not in touch with God, but really we are. Sometimes it is about what we expect that in touch with God will look like isn't what actually is what we need. I know that probably makes no sense. Let me explain. This is about the stillness before God and just waiting on God and being in His Word and knowing that He will speak to us in His Word and stilling our hearts. That was key for me, stilling my heart before the Lord. And I often use the analogy, Steve, and when the waters are stirred up, if there's a pond of water and it's all stirred up, it's really muddy and we can't see the bottom. When we are all stirred up, we can't see God. When we can't see what God is saying to us or feel what God is saying to us. So that was number one, to still my heart, to be in the Word, to have others pray for me as well, to be in a church, to have people within your church, whether it's a life group, a connection group, but people, godly people that can pray for you and walk with you on this journey, because God hasn't gone anywhere. The enemy of our souls, remember, the battle is for our hearts, and the enemy wants us to think we're not hearing from God, but we actually are. So encourage you to still yourself before the Lord and just, often for me, getting on my knees and really asking the Lord, is there something that I need to do that's blocking me? And maybe it is some more forgiveness that you need to go through. And those forgiveness prayers are really simple. Just, asking God to lead you to forgive the person. And we haven't spoken about this yet, but forgiving ourselves is really key. So maybe there's some work there that you need to do in that space. But just make sure you've got really good structure around you, Steve, and good Christian support, people that will help you. And if you need counselling, Christian counselling, really encourage you to look for that as well.
Okay, no worries, Wendy. I do have quite a few people in the town I come from, just Strathalbyn. I'm always on the prayer chain. I seem to have one thing after another happen, with my health, and so I'm on the prayer chain in Strathalbyn here, and I've got quite a few churches. The churches here are quite united, and they are praying for me. But I get, I just feel a bit lost sometimes there, Wendy,
Yeah, and I understand that. And you know what? You're not, though, Stephen. You're not lost. God has not left you. This is about you finding who you are in Him. So the big turnaround for me was understanding who He was and who I was in Him. So once you start to understand who God is and who he is for you, and who he is for you right now. He's your Father. And really accepting that and saying, I know that you're my Father and that you will guide me and lead me. Again, I come back and say the battle is for our hearts, Stephen. So the enemy will tell you that you're lost, and that this is about you praying and really seeking God. If you're not hearing anything back, it doesn't matter. You keep praying and really asking the Lord to move in this situation for you, and encourage you as well. Get into Ephesians and use the word to put on that armor of God. You know, that the things, the helmet of salvation to gird up your physical, your spiritual, and your emotional mind, just to strengthen you in your walk with the Lord. He's going to lead you and guide you. He absolutely will. And just keep seeking him.
Yeah, I have got quite a few Bibles there, Wendy, here and there. I have a bit of trouble with memory and with recall, and because of a certain accident I had a while ago. So it's sort of hard for me to sort of pick up something at the moment and read it and then remember it, because I forget it just after I've read it. So are there any simple prayers that I can say, or is there anything that I...
Well, I'm going to encourage you, and Andrew, you jump in too if you know something here, but the Bible app is really good because it'll give you one word, and then it'll give you a video, and it'll give you a tiny little reading, and then it'll give you some prayers if you use the Bible app.
Is this the YouVersion Bible app you're talking about, Wendy? Stephen, have you heard of the YouVersion Bible app?
Yeah.
She's talking about downloading that. Yep. So go on, Wendy.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other one that I really encourage, and any of the listeners, John Eldridge has an app called Pause, Pause. It is the most powerful thing. Pause. It's a pause.
It's an app called Pause, yeah, Pause, an app called Pause. You can download that on your phone.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And it is very powerful, and it will lead you through some incredible prayers, as well as just some time of restoring your union with God and understanding who he is for you. And I actually think both of those, Stephen, will be really helpful for you and give you what you need.
Yeah, no worries. Okay then. Well, thanks very much.
And Stephen, I just want to ask you if you can just stay on the phone. We're about to go to news, but I just want to say to you too. We can sense that you've been through some significant trauma and hurt in your life, and we just want to say we're just sorry. We don't know what happened. We don't know who did it, but we're just sorry, mate. And but all we can say is that God is your Father, and he does love you. And whatever's happened in this world or on this earth, it wasn't God. It was actually people that have done the harm to you. And the first caller we're going to talk to is Belinda, and Belinda is calling from Victoria. Belinda, welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
We're great. How are you today?
Oh, well, look, I'm really, really touched after listening to Stephen. I think my heart just went out to that poor man, and it was so nice to hear you guys pray for him. I did actually hear that. But I wanted to talk about forgiveness in my life. I had a very horrible, horrible childhood with a very violent, drunken father. We never had a very good relationship, my dad and I. He just, he wouldn't look at me and he wouldn't acknowledge me for who I was. And I forgave my dad for that and spent my whole entire life trying to connect with him and say, I love you, Dad, I love you. I think I would have been about 35 when he first ever said, I love you. And I recall it just so vividly. It was Father's Day, and I always used to say before I hung up, I love you, Dad. And he said, I love you, mate. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe my dad just said that. So that's one of those memories that will stay with me forever. But I think as far as speaking about forgiveness, I forgave my dad for the lifestyle that he, brought us up in. And it's...
Are you there? Gee, I think she's been cut off there. But gee, what a powerful story that for years she's actually had to forgive her dad, actively forgive her dad, and just say, I love you, and get no response. Have you come across this before, Wendy, where people have really had to work it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that she kept saying, I love you. And sometimes we do need to be that consistent in doing that, as well as in forgiving. Forgiveness sometimes is not a one and done, that we have to do it again and again when it comes to our mind until it does start to pass further and further from us, and just telling somebody that you love them, because honestly, and I was thinking about that when Belinda was speaking, we never quite know what's going on in the other person's mind or in their heart that causes them to behave the way they are. And sharing your love, because you've got that love of the Lord, actually can bring that breakthrough, and it sounds like it did for Belinda and her dad.
Yeah, she's back now, Belinda. Sorry, we got cut off then. But so Belinda, it's quite an amazing story. So how old were you when you really felt convicted in your heart to forgive your dad?
Look, I would have probably been about 21, I think, and I just recently had a baby, and I'm going to keep getting cut off here, I think. So it was a time where I thought, this is my dad, I need him to be involved in my child's life. So it was that step, to know that I'm a parent now and I need to have my father in my child's life. And then as time went on, it just became easier to forgive him, when you become an adult and you understand why this happened to my dad, why he did this. The other part of my story is that my stepmother stopped me from having any visits with my dad for the last 25 years of my life. And in that, he also stopped my daughter from having any visits or any conversation with my father. So it was a very lonely, probably last 25 years of his life, that my forgiveness became so abundant because I knew God has me and I am a child of God. So when my dad passed away, my dad was not a believer in God, never was, but I sat in the room with him and I said to him, Dad, you will see a hand reach down from heaven and it will be God. And you take his hand and you go home. I think it was probably 20 minutes after that my dad passed away. And then it was 2 weeks later that I went to my church and a lady had painted a picture, and my dad was a boxer in his younger years. And she painted this beautiful picture of a boxer sitting in the corner of the ring, sad. And then in the middle of the ring there was a hand reaching down, and the boxer had his hand up and took the hand of God. And I thought, the forgiveness that you have is so powerful for other people as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it sounds like, Belinda, I'm just thinking about your story. So really, your message to people, because there's a lot of people listening right now, is that it was hard at first, but looking back now, I'm assuming you're just so glad you went on that journey where you decided to forgive, you decided to work it, yeah. and I guess for you now, there's no regrets?
No regrets at all. I will love my dad until the day I die. He was my dad. He wasn't perfect. We are not perfect. But with the help of God, he showed me, forgive your dad, darling, and move forward and pray for your, and that's something that I do all the time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Belinda, for calling, because that's such a powerful story. I've actually never really heard a story like yours where someone's had to, for years, just keep saying I love you to a parent and forgiving them and getting no response and no real warmth from the other side, but you just persevered there and you ended up with a great relationship at the end there, and such a powerful story. Belinda, I want to thank you again for calling, and we're going to move on to some other callers now, but God bless, Belinda, and hopefully we'll hear from you again on 2020 as well. But yeah, incredible. We've got another caller on the line, and it's Steve from the south coast of New South Wales. Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, g'day, Andrew. How you going?
I'm good.
Just to put it out there, Wendy's my sister.
Okay, so you're one of the siblings.
Yeah, so I knew Wendy was on this morning because she actually sent me a message saying that she was on doing this and asked me to pray for her. And I thought I'll listen in, and I did. So, look, first of all, if I could just start by saying what you see with... Sorry. what you see with Wendy is what you get. You get a genuine, faith-filled woman who really considers every word she speaks and how it will affect those that her words fall upon. And it doesn't mean she's perfect. She's not. None of us are. But watching her journey, talking to her, being encouraged by her throughout my life, and she has never been nor have I, a woe is me. It was so bad and all this bad stuff happened to her. It was just our story. And you've said before that, we all have a story, and we do. And what Wendy has been able to do and do it so well is to use that story not to promote herself, but to be able to speak into people's lives and meet them where they're at, the same as what Jesus did. And through that, be able to help them discover forgiveness. And forgiveness is a lifelong journey. That's the thing of it. It's not a one-off, rip the Band-Aid off and all will be well.
Yeah.
And the hardest person to forgive is ourselves for being just human for a start, and we just have to be able to forgive ourselves, because unforgiveness only hurts us. Not having a dad in your life, my experience with 3 daughters and 5 granddaughters is that, girls get a sense of who their value as a woman is from their fathers, and to have a father that is abusive, it's a very hard road to come back from.
Yeah.
But if you fall down 100 times, get up 101 and keep going, and keep just every day. I ask God every day to forgive me. I ask Him to forgive me all the time. And, for a very long time, the only prayer I was ever able to pray was just thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for letting me draw breath. Thank you for so many things. And if that's the only prayer you're able to pray, it's sufficient.
Yeah. Steve, can I ask you, Steve, and by the way, thank you for giving your sister a big endorsement there, and you've obviously got a great relationship. But your journey, Steve, how old were you when your dad passed?
I was 4. It was 58 years ago on the 21st of May, which was only last week. I was 4 years old, and I remember some years later, I could always remember running down the road. I have a really good recall and a really good memory, and I can remember running down the road, the dirt road at Uralla with Wendy after this happened. It was some years later when I had prayer counselling, and I always remember the terror and the fright that I felt. And I was having this prayer counselling, and during this prayer counselling, for the first time ever, I saw myself stop running. I started walking, and I reached out my hand, and it was Jesus next to me, and He took my hand, and we just walked. And I know He was with me, same as, and that's why I called. I heard Wendy say, earlier that God carried her that day. Well, He carried us, and He's carried us all our life.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. I mean, you've gone on to have your own family and your own grandkids. But Steve, can I ask you, do you have any memories of your dad? Like, you were 4, do you remember your dad?
I do. I do have memories. Often those memories are of... Here's a funny one. I don't know whether it's funny or not, but it's a memory. Look, back in those days, there was not a lot of help. There was no social support, and to go back and read my docs file and have a look at even the language that welfare workers use describing parents and different things like that, we have come a long way. But it was, alcohol was a big part of Mum and Dad's life, and I can remember Mum and Dad coming home from the pub. Us kids were at home by ourselves, and on a Saturday, coming home from a pub with a bottle of Coke and a Violet Crumble. And I always remember that because it was a happy moment, It wasn't till many years later that I discovered learned that Dad actually had stomach cancer. And both him and Mum became addicted to proprietary substance you could get over the counter at the chemist called chloridine, I think it was, and it actually had chloroform in it, morphine, all sorts of horrible stuff. And there was, once Dad had died, there was just no support for Mum. And she went down that road where eventually, whether on purpose or not, she died from an overdose. And to be honest, I think she died of a broken heart,
Poor thing.
But there was just not the support around. So, and being 4 and then going into orphanages and homes and, physical and sexual abuse and then multiple foster families, you know what? And here I am today. I'm still here. And like Wendy, I like who I am as a person. Part of who I am has been forged from all those experiences and all those bad days and all those good days. And I'm a firefighter with fire and rescue. I'm off at the moment with PTSD. But even through that journey of this, God is right there alongside me.
Yeah.
I've just got to remember to turn and look to Him.
Yeah. Isn't it the but God story,
Sorry,
Stephen's story that we had before? No. Stephen's story before, but God, because God will intervene for him and meet him. Belinda's story, but God gave her the strength and the power to be able to tell her dad she loved him even when she wasn't getting anything back, and to forgive him. And but God, for you to be where you are and where I am, and all of the listeners that haven't called in, they'll have a but God story. And that's, but for God, I would not be standing today. And that's the power and the greatness and the goodness and of our God. Right, Stephen? Right, Andrew?
Amen. And Stephen, I just want to thank you so much for calling in. We've actually got a couple other callers, and I want to try and get to them as well because I've been really patient. But mate, your story's amazing. Your story's amazing. I'll tell you why, because you become a dad, you become a granddad, you've got beautiful daughters and grandkids, and you've done your best, mate. And it sounds like you've done a great job, and, you've got a great relationship with your sister. But thank you for calling in and sharing a little bit of your journey today.
Have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Bless you. Love
Thank
you,
you,
sis.
Stephen. Thank you. And we've taken a lot of courage for Stephen to call in today. So
Thanks, brother. Thank you, brother. God bless. Always welcome to call us again another time as well. But we've got some other callers, and one of them's been very patient. Shane from WA. Shane, are you there? Hello, Shane.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
We can now, Shane. Have you got a comment or a question for Wendy today?
Really, just to get that app that you mentioned, I was distracted because I was going in between going to the toilet and getting a drink from the fridge.
So it's called the YouVersion Bible app, and there's another app that she mentioned. It's called Pause, Pause. So YouVersion Bible app and Pause, Pause.
S-E, yeah.
That's the one.
I mean, I've had quite a bit of hurt in life, and I find it hard at times to relate to people because in the early part of my salvation, which was quite dramatic in Dalwallinu, they had a via satellite telecast that was pre-recorded of Billy Graham back in '95. And a couple of years after that, I got introduced to someone through a church in Perth who had a outreach through Northam many years ago. I won't mention the year, but there was quite a bit of hurt caused through that. And I remember I've blocked up with most of the memories. It was that hurtful what he did to me. I mean. The only memory I have of him was saying that, well, perhaps I should go on this Job training type thing. He says, you're already going through it, very quietly under his breath, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And
so, Wendy, have you got a comment for Shane? Because we've got another caller waiting as well.
Yeah,
so,
Shane, I just encourage you to jump on and use the YouVersion Bible app. It really will be life-changing, as will the Pause app. And thank you for taking the time to call in today. Thank you. And we do pray for God's absolute best for you on your journey.
Sorry, what was that?
We just said that we just pray that God would continue to heal you on your journey. Many of our listeners have also experienced trauma and hurt and are on a journey of forgiveness. And it sounds like you're still on your journey, Shane. So we're just praying for you that God would continue to heal you and restore you. But yeah, that YouVersion Bible app and that Pause app will be great tools. We also have a call line here at Vision, and you can call, and this is for all of our listeners, 1-800-772-936, and that's a prayer support line. People can pray with you over the phone. Encourage you to ring that. That's 1-800-772-936. We have another caller, Annette, who's been very patient. Are you there, Annette?
Yes, I am.
Have you got a comment or a question for Wendy today?
Just a comment. I don't have much memory of my abused childhood. It's only spasmodic, and apparently there's a whole iceberg of issues underneath the water. And what I remember is only a little bit that is on the surface. So when I married at 18, and when I became a Christian, which was in my late 20s, I had always blamed myself, but never told anyone. And I didn't understand forgiveness. I didn't understand it at all. When I became a Christian, I couldn't say the Lord's Prayer, and I had a lovely relationship with Jesus only. And it was years before I could actually call God my Father. And I didn't understand why He's forgiving me. And because I didn't understand what the forgiveness was all about. And I could never, I didn't associate forgiveness with the burden that I had been carrying all my life. And it wasn't until I researched what actually God is forgiving in me. Why is He forgiving me? What have I done to Him? And when I researched it and went to Bible studies about forgiveness and heard many sermons on forgiveness, the penny dropped. And I realized that exactly why God has forgiven me, and I needed to accept that forgiveness. Yeah. And I needed to accept the fact that I need to forgive myself. Yes. And then, it was only then that I could accept the fact of forgiving my father for the abuse.
Wonderful, wonderful. Have you got a encouragement for Annette now, Wendy? Because we're moving towards the end of this segment. But
Anita, thank you for calling in and sharing even just a tiny little bit of your story, and really encourage you to stay on the journey. I said to Andrew earlier, we're all still on this journey of forgiving others, forgiving ourselves, finding out who God is for us, and just really encourage you to, lean in on God and allow Him to reveal more and more of His wonderful, incredible, loving, generous character to you every day. And thank you again for calling in.
Thank you, Heath.
And Annette, I want to say thank you too for calling in, and just the key I got from yours was that you had to forgive yourself and accept yourself, and the fact that you just kept pushing in and pressing into the Word and in prayer, and well done, Annette, and just thanks so much for sharing your story. We're going to try and get one more caller on very quickly, and we have Jessica from North Ipswich in Queensland. Jessica, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
What would you like to share today?
I've just been listening since the beginning, and I just wanted, it made me realize that sometimes women don't, it took me a long time because I did deliverance through my pastor, and when Wendy mentioned about that she lost her virginity at 13, may I say that, and it was on Father's Day, or did I get that wrong? So I remember that I was seduced by a 20-year-old man when I was 14 years old, and it was the day before Father's Day, and I felt so guilty. And I remember just telling a friend of mine who was a family friend, but it was around the same age, and I remember my father coming the next on Father's Day having a barbecue and putting his arms around me and going, "This is my little girl, you know, I'm so proud of her." And I'm like, I felt so guilty. And I always had it in my heart that I wanted to keep my virginity till I got married. And so when that happened, it took a long time for me to get over it. But then the gentleman that had rung before this lady that you spoke to, he mentioned that the validation of a woman does come from a father, and that's where you really seek it. And I remember my father, when I was being very naughty, you know, like growing up, I think around like 16, 15, and he didn't know how to stop me from not keeping my head in the books and just partying. So I come from a South American culture where music is so enticing to you. And so all I wanted to do was just party and dance and be out with friends. And so my dad just turned around and said this one thing that carried throughout my whole life. And he said, because I'm a very petite frame, and he said, "What would men want out of you? You're so thin, and, you know, they're only using you." And that's how he spoke to me. And I remember that wounded me more than anything.
Oh, wow. You know, Jessica, I just want to ask, I'm going to keep you on the line, and I'm going to get Wendy to talk to you. We have to move on with the show now, but I just want to thank you so much for calling. You've been so patient. But if you just hold on there, Wendy's going to have a chat to you very shortly. But before that, Wendy, I just want to formally thank you for joining us today. And if you want to get in touch with Wendy, it's wendyburnsconsulting.com.au. That's wendyburnsconsulting.com.au. Wendy, I want to thank you for joining us today. So many callers, so many people getting touched who haven't called. And Wendy, also stay on the line, please. I want you to talk to Jessica. And Jessica, we could have talked to you for another half an hour. And all of our callers, I could listen for an hour to your stories and just allow God to use Wendy to speak into your life. But you just wait there, Jessica, and Wendy will help you in a second. But Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today in 2020.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.